There comes a moment in every confrontation when your silence becomes the loudest voice in the room. A moment when you no longer rush to defend your name, your point, or your pride. You simply stop reacting. And that's when everything shifts. Because people don't expect calmness. They expect conflict. They expect you to explain, to justify, to prove. When you don't, their rhythm breaks. Their confidence cracks. They feel the weight of their own noise echoing back at them. They called for a battle, and you never showed up. They wanted your energy, your reaction, your fire. But instead, they meet silence. That silence unsettles them, because it removes the very ground their argument stood on. Carl Jung once observed that people are rarely in conflict with others. They are in conflict with themselves. And when you refuse to play the role they've assigned you, their internal conflict has nowhere to go. It's exposed. It has to face itself. You see, reaction is the fuel of every emotional exchange. It gives meaning to their provocation. It keeps the pattern alive. But silence starves it. Calmness isolates it. You're no longer inside their storm. You've stepped outside of it, and from that still place, you start to see clearly. Not who's right, not who's wrong, but who's trapped in their own noise. When you stop reacting, you reclaim your energy from the chaos. You stop playing defense and start embodying presence. You begin to see that explanation is often a disguised form of fear, a need to be understood, accepted, validated. But calmness doesn't need validation. It stands on its own. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you no longer need to say it to be at peace. That's the moment they panic. Because the game they were playing no longer works. The control they thought they had dissolves. And they're left with the one thing they were running from all along. The echo of their own unrest. That's the moment you realize. Real power doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It simply stands still and watches the noise fade away. Every reaction begins as a spark, a sudden pull to defend, to prove, to protect the image we hold of ourselves. It happens fast. Someone challenges you, misunderstands you, disrespects you, and before thought can intervene, emotion takes control. That's the ego stepping forward, the part of the mind that lives to preserve identity, to maintain control, to survive psychologically. Carl Jung described the ego as the narrow field of consciousness that believes it is the whole self. But it's not. It's just the surface, the mask of awareness that fears being seen as small, wrong, or powerless. When that mask feels threatened, it fights. It argues. It justifies. Because the ego feeds on attention. Even negative attention sustains it. Every time you react defensively, you're unconsciously confirming the threat it perceives. You're saying, yes, this matters enough to shake me. You hand away control, not because someone took it, but because you offered it through emotion. Conflict thrives on that exchange. It's not the words that create the storm. It's the invisible loop of reaction and counter-reaction. They strike, you respond. They project, you defend. The pattern continues, and no one sees clearly. Jung understood that awareness ends the loop. Once you see the impulse rise, that heat, that tightness, that urge to prove, you've already created distance between you and it. And in that distance lies choice. Reaction is unconscious. Response is conscious. The moment you notice your impulse to react, you've stepped into awareness. You've interrupted the chain. And that interruption is everything, because the one who observes emotion cannot be controlled by it. Most people confuse reaction with strength. They think power means speaking louder, defending harder, pushing back faster. But real strength is the ability to remain centered when everything else is pulling you outward, to stay composed when your ego screams for validation. Calmness doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't obey every feeling that appears. It's awareness mastering impulse. The mind that reacts is a servant to its emotions. The mind that observes becomes its own master. And that's where true authority begins, not in overpowering others, but in no longer being overpowered by yourself. Every conflict begins outside of you, but its roots are always within. Carl Jung taught that what we see in others often reflects what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. That is projection, the unconscious act of casting our own hidden traits onto someone else. We see arrogance and call it theirs. We see weakness and call it theirs. But often, it's our own unintegrated side staring back, wearing another face. When conflict arises, it's rarely just about the words spoken. It's about what those words awaken in you. Something deeper, something older. A wound, a belief, a fear that was already there. So when someone challenges you, and you feel that fire surge up inside, pause. Ask yourself, what is this reaction revealing about me? That's the question that breaks the illusion, because the moment you stop seeing the other person as the enemy, you start seeing the mirror. When you stay calm, you deny the projection a place to land. You return the emotion to its source. Your silence becomes a reflection, not of submission, but of truth. They wanted a fight, not a reflection. They wanted to offload their chaos onto you, to make you carry it for them. But your calmness returns it untouched. It says, "This belongs to you, not me." And that moment of reflection is unbearable for many, because now they must face what they tried to escape. They must see the very thing they projected. That's why your silence feels so threatening. It holds up a mirror they cannot control. When you stop defending yourself, you end their illusion of power, because power in conflict depends on your participation. They need you to react to complete their pattern. They need your emotion to justify their own. But you, still quiet, aware, break the pattern completely. Your calmness reveals their unrest. Your restraint exposes their dependence on your reaction. In that stillness, they begin to feel something they didn't expect, their own reflection staring back through your silence. And that's when they panic. Not because you've won, but because they've finally met themselves. Silence is not emptiness. It's containment. It's the moment when awareness holds emotion without letting it spill. Most people misunderstand calmness. They think it means you don't care, but true calmness is not absence. It's presence under control. It's when the inner noise finally meets its boundary. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, of bringing all the unseen parts of yourself into awareness. Stillness is how that process begins, because when the mind grows quiet, the unconscious becomes visible. In silence, you start to notice the tiny movements within you, the urge to speak, the tension to be right, the need to be seen. You feel it rise, and instead of obeying it, you observe it. That is inner stillness, the ability to witness without surrendering control. It takes more strength to stay calm than to strike back. Because reaction is instinct. Calmness is choice. The mind wants movement, words, arguments, defense. Stillness denies it the familiar chaos it feeds on. And in that denial, the ego begins to dissolve. You realize that calmness isn't about appearing strong. It's about not needing to appear at all. You're no longer trying to win the moment. You're trying to understand it. Stillness gives you that space, the space between stimulus and response where freedom lives. It's not suppression. It's awareness. Suppression says, I can't feel this. Stillness says, I can feel this, and I don't need to act on it. That difference is everything. It's how emotion transforms into insight instead of destruction. It's how you stop repeating old patterns. It's how you start to know yourself, not through conflict, but through observation. Jung believed that balance is not achieved by eliminating emotion, but by giving it form through consciousness. That's what inner stillness does. It allows every feeling to exist without controlling you. The quieter you become inside, the clearer you see outside. And that clarity is power. Not the power to dominate, but the power to remain undisturbed. Stillness doesn't shout. It doesn't chase. It simply is. And in a world addicted to reaction, that kind of stillness becomes the rarest form of strength. Every conflict runs on fuel, and that fuel is reaction. Without your reaction, the pattern collapses. People seek control not through clarity, but through emotional leverage. They rely on your defensiveness to validate their position. They provoke because it keeps the game alive. But calmness ends the game completely. The moment you stop reacting, the rules dissolve. They can no longer find the rhythm they've always used. No argument to feed from. No energy to push against. No predictable response to pull the strings of. That's when they begin to lose balance. Because your calmness removes their control point. It denies them the emotional exchange they depend on to feel powerful. Carl Jung said that power over others fades when they become conscious of the mechanism controlling them. Calmness is that consciousness made visible. It shows that you see the game, and you're not playing. Your silence interrupts their strategy. It forces awareness where there was only reaction, and awareness is something most people fear. When you remain centered, they begin to sense that they've lost influence, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting entirely. You didn't match their tone. You didn't lower yourself to defend your worth. You simply stepped out of the pattern. And now, the only tension left is theirs. It's disarming, almost unnatural, because most conflicts depend on emotional symmetry. They expect fire for fire, sound for sound. But when they meet stillness, it exposes the imbalance. They feel naked in the quiet, because calmness reveals what chaos tries to hide. The one who provokes without reaction stands face to face with their own emptiness. That's the panic behind your silence. It's not that you've done something to them. It's that you've stopped doing what kept them comfortable. And suddenly, they must sit with what your calmness uncovers, their dependence on control, their need to dominate the emotional space, their inability to face themselves without a response to feed on. That's the hidden power of composure. It's not resistance, it's refusal. Refusal to be pulled into another person's unconscious storm. Your stillness is not a retreat, it's a boundary. Clear, firm, untouchable. In that silence, you reclaim your energy. You turn the mirror toward them, and the more they push, the more they realize. They're only fighting their own reflection. That's when control dissolves. That's when calmness wins without a word. When you choose calmness, something profound begins to shift within. The energy that once rushed outward in defense starts to turn inward in awareness. You stop bleeding energy through explanation. You stop exhausting yourself in invisible battles for validation, and for the first time, you begin to feel what peace actually is. Not a word, not an idea, but a steady inner state. Inside you, the noise begins to fade. The mind that once chased control now learns to observe. You begin to see emotions rise and fall like waves, temporary, passing, no longer absolute. Carl Jung often said that everything unresolved in the unconscious eventually appears as fate. But awareness transforms that fate into understanding. By staying calm, you stop reacting from what's unconscious in you and start responding from what's aware. That's the quiet revolution. You begin to sense the difference between reaction and response, between urgency and clarity, between defending yourself and understanding yourself. Each moment of stillness strengthens that boundary inside, the space where you end and everything else begins. The conflict that once defined your energy now becomes your teacher. You start to recognize what triggers you, what pulls you, what drains you. And instead of being consumed by it, you study it. You see that every provocation was never really about the other person. It was about how easily you could be moved from your center. When you remain calm, that movement stops. You return to center again and again until it becomes home. This is not emotional numbness. It's emotional intelligence. It's learning that not every feeling needs a reaction to be real. You begin to understand that silence doesn't suppress energy. It refines it. It channels it into clarity, strength, and depth. Inside, a new kind of stability forms, one that isn't dependent on approval or outcome. It's self-sustained, self-contained, whole. Jung believed that integration is the highest goal of the psyche, to know every part of yourself without being ruled by any of it. That's what happens in calmness. You integrate. You stop running from the parts of you that conflict exposes. You begin to meet them, name them, own them. And when you own them, no one else can use them against you. Your silence becomes your equilibrium. Your composure becomes your armor. Not a barrier to the world, but a stable foundation beneath it. The less you react, the more you understand. The more you understand, the freer you become. And that's the quiet truth. Calmness isn't what happens when the world stops disturbing you. It's what happens when the world can no longer disturb what's already still within. When you stop reacting, they don't understand it at first. They feel the silence, and it unsettles them, because their power depended on your participation. They built their rhythm around your response, your tone, your energy, your defensiveness. Every time you argued, explained, or justified, you unknowingly confirmed their control of the space. But now, that pattern is gone. They speak, and nothing returns. They provoke, and no spark catches. They expect the old version of you, the one that explained, defended, tried to be understood. But that version has gone quiet. What they meet instead is something they can't categorize, a calm presence that neither attacks nor retreats. And in that stillness, something inside them begins to shift. First comes confusion. They don't know how to continue the game. Then comes frustration, because silence offers no foothold. Then comes reflection, the moment when they start to sense that the noise wasn't coming from you after all. Carl Jung said that what we resist in others is often what we cannot accept in ourselves. When you no longer react, you stop carrying their projection for them. They are forced to meet their own reflection, the parts they tried to transfer onto you. That's why your calmness feels dangerous. It doesn't fight them. It reveals them. Silence becomes a mirror they cannot shatter. And what they see there is their own unrest, their own insecurity, their own imbalance. You didn't expose them. They exposed themselves in the absence of your reaction. This is the panic behind your composure. It's not anger they feel. It's disorientation. Because your lack of reaction shows them the truth. They never had power over you, only over your reactivity. And once that reactivity is gone, their illusion of control dissolves with it. Some people will grow from that moment. They'll sense the mirror and begin to question themselves. Others will resist it, retreat from it, deny it completely. But either way, your calmness has done its work. It has revealed what's real. Silence changes the field of energy. It shifts the focus from argument to awareness. It stops the storm, not by force, but by refusal. They realize, often too late, that your lack of defense was never weakness. It was understanding. And in that understanding, you've done what words never could. You've shown them themselves. Calmness is not retreat. It's command. It's the quiet authority that comes from no longer needing to prove anything. It's the strength that doesn't perform. It simply is. When you remain calm, you send a signal the world rarely understands, that you've moved beyond control as currency. You no longer chase validation, and you no longer fear misunderstanding. Carl Jung said that power that's unconscious turns to possession. But power that's conscious turns to presence, and presence is what calmness truly is. Awareness standing upright, unmoved, undisturbed. Your silence doesn't beg to be believed. It doesn't demand to be right. It exists from a deeper knowing. That truth doesn't need to fight to remain true. The one who reacts is being led. The one who stays centered is leading, without ever needing to declare it. That's the paradox of calmness. It disarms everything it touches without lifting a hand. Calmness speaks a language the ego can't understand, because it isn't trying to win. It's revealing what's already won. When you hold your stillness in conflict, you become the steady axis in a spinning world. People feel that gravity even if they can't explain it. They sense that you see more than you say, and in that perception, influence is born, not through volume, but through vibration. You don't command through force, you command through presence. It's the quiet confidence that says, I am not threatened by your noise, because I am no longer run by mine. This is psychological command, the kind Jung described when he spoke of differentiation, the moment when a person becomes whole enough to stand alone. You are no longer defined by opposition. You no longer rise or fall by reaction. You exist in the center, grounded, conscious, unshaken. That is the calm that unsettles those who need control. That is the calm that cannot be manipulated. Because how do you move someone who no longer fights motion? How do you dominate someone who no longer resists? That's the quiet authority of the self-aware. It doesn't shout, it doesn't chase, it simply holds its position. And in a world built on emotional turbulence, that kind of calm becomes magnetic. It draws respect, even from those who don't understand it. It shifts rooms, redirects energy, ends conflicts before they begin. This is not passivity, it's precision. The precision of knowing that your energy is too valuable to be spent on noise. The precision of understanding that silence is the ultimate control. When you master calmness, you stop defending yourself, because you finally understand nothing real in you needs defense. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't defend. It doesn't chase to be understood. It simply stands, calm, aware, and rooted. Carl Jung taught that when the inner world is ordered, the outer world loses its power to disturb it. Silence is that order made visible. It's not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of understanding. So next time conflict calls your name, don't defend, don't rush to prove, just observe, because the one who remains calm always wins the deeper battle. You don't need to shout your strength. You don't need to prove your truth. You simply live it, through stillness, through awareness, through quiet control.